A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to our annual Chicago ISNA Education Forum in collaboration with ISNA. I wanted to welcome our educators around the country and around the world, thanking you for joining us today as we continue with our virtual forum, alhamdulillah. I'm Azra Naqvi, and I'm the principal of Hadi School of Excellence in Chicago, and I'm a board member of ISNA as well as the Council of Islamic School of North America, ISNA Education Forum Planning Committee. Our next leadership track will be on Leadership Challenge, connecting best practices to Islamic Foundation by Brother William White. William White is a vice president of ISNA, and he holds a master's degree in educational administration in Spanish from the University of Louisville. In addition to his current role as a principal of Islamic School of Louisville, he has worked as an elementary school teacher and university lecturer. He led his school in its initial accreditation through Advanced Ed and ISNA, and has helped establish a variety of programs and initiatives that help improve the school's enrollment and academic performances. William is passionate about continuing improvement and serving on accreditation teams for Islamic schools. He provides leadership training for adults and children, students who are interested in improving their knowledge of effective leadership practices. So during this session is the Certified Leadership Challenge facilitated by Brother Williams, and he will present a unique overview of one of the best known leadership research model and inspiring connection to Islam through the Quran and Sunnah. I just wanted to say that I'm actually was a participant, unfortunately, to be a part of the Leadership Challenge session that was done in last October. And it was one of the best workshops that I've ever had. And I'm just excited to learn more about how we're going to be integrating Quran and Sunnah into this leadership challenge. With that, I would like to invite Brother Williams to please take it away.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Sister Azra, for the introduction. Today we have about an hour to be together, and I was asked to talk about something that I facilitate often, which is a workshop called the Leadership Challenge. And we'll talk about what the Leadership Challenge is. But as the ISNA and ISNA Education Forum, we're going to focus a lot on how this research, the secular research, connects a lot to Islam. And with that, this is not going to be a lecture. This is not going to be me talking for just an hour and going through a bunch of slides. I plan on trying to make this as interactive as possible. So I hope that you guys came and you're ready, inshallah, to chat, to talk, to respond, and also to do some activities in breakout rooms as well. Because it's the genius is in the room. My job is just to kind of try to facilitate those discussions, because all of this knowledge we have amongst ourselves. And our goal is truly to share that. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So in the chat box, to see who's here and who's awake, we'll start off with who can go ahead and type in the chat box the number of years you have worked as a leader, and type in one word that describes you when you are at your best as a leader. So for me, I might type in, say, 12 years, and for the number of years as a leader, and then I would type in one word that describes me as when I'm best as a leader is inspired. So let's see what we have in here. I'd like to see kind of who is in the Zoom room with us today. Okay, Sister Majida, Abdul Karim, 21 years, mashallah. And reflective. For the Mu'taz, 10 years. Facilitator. Hanima, 28 years. Bismillah, mashallah. Next steps. Stacy, or Ziad Awad, 22 years. And Sister Azra, 18 years as a leader, connected. Leader, so we have new as a leader. All right, 9 years. Sister Aisha, mashallah. Positive. 5 years, collaborative. Sister Megda, 29 years. Sister Regia, 20 years. So we're getting a pretty good feel for the idea. I can't do mental math this quickly, but I would imagine that this number is well over 100. I think we're getting over 200 years, 25 just added. I'm a teacher for 7, but consider myself as a leader of classroom. Excellent. Tons of years of experience, and all of us have some sort of leadership experience. One thing we'll talk about today is that leadership is not just about being a capital L leader, so principal, head of board, but leadership is about behavior. And we're all leaders in different ways. So I don't think anyone who says 0 years as a leader, it's actually accurate. Because if you work as a teacher, you lead, right? You're leading students. You're leading people in your family, mashallah. So there's a lot of experience in this room already. I'm excited to learn from you during this next session. So a little bit about me in addition to what Sister Ezra said. So I am a principal. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. This is more or less my hometown. It's an Islamic school called the Islamic School of Louisville. And in addition to what Sister Ezra said, I've been very involved in something called the Leadership Challenge, which is work by 2 very famous authors in leadership named Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. And about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, I attended a workshop and based off of the materials that they have. And I immediately, within the first 6 hours of being in there, I decided I want to facilitate this because it connected with me. It just made sense. And it inspired me as someone in a Muslim community that this content is essentially what Islam tells us to do, right? It really just goes so hand in hand with it. So I got involved with that. I became a trained facilitator and then a certified facilitator. And alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to go around to many different schools and states throughout the US to facilitate this content. And it's available for teachers, or for adult leaders, and for students. The book that this comes from is called The Leadership Challenge. It's now in its 6th edition. So it started in the 1980s. So it's over 30 years of research. And there have been millions, over 3 million participants in the research database that they have used. And hundreds of studies, doctoral research theses, and projects have been done that verify the validity of what they have found. Now, what we're going to talk about is just a brief introduction to this content. We're going to talk about how this connects to us as Islam, see if you guys make some of the same connections that I make. And then we're going to have some opportunities for some activities where we are going to reflect on just parts of this, on how we can improve our own leadership skills moving forward, inshallah. So I want to start off with a little bit of a picture here. I'm going to ask you a question. You could type in the chat box. What do you see in this picture? Just type in. What do you see? It's 2 images. You should see an image, and there's a top part and a bottom part. And I'll check the chat and see what you guys have. Okay, Sister Yasmin, leaders lead by modeling, teamwork, top-down versus decentralized. Principal working collaboratively, difference between a boss, someone who commands, and a leader, someone who encourages. 2 different styles of leadership, mashallah. So I think we see 2 different parts here, leading by example. We see in the very top part, which you guys are capturing very well, is you see the top part of the image has boss, mission, and where is the boss seated? The boss is seated at the back. And it looks like that boss is sending commands to people, telling them what to do, right? If you look at the bottom of it, you find the leader is not sitting in the chair, not sitting in the back, telling people what to do. The leader is in the front, encouraging people, showing people the way. And I think that we have all experienced both types of either leadership or management. And what we're going to be talking about is how we can be the person in the bottom part of this image, about being a leader, not simply a boss or a manager. Now, what I want to share with you is there is a quote here. And I'm going to ask, is there a volunteer? Is there a volunteer who would like to read this quote for me? This is what the authors Kouzes and Posner from the Leadership Challenge, this is how they define what leadership is. Let's see who's the first person to unmute who starts.
Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam.
The art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations.
Jazakallahu khairan, Sister Aisha. So, Sister Aisha, what stands out to you in this particular quote? This is how they define leadership. Leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. What are some words that stand out to you?
The word art and struggle.
Art and struggle. Very good. Why does the word struggle stand out to you?
Because in order for us to grow, we need to struggle.
Excellent. So this is a definition of leadership that goes similarly with the bottom half of the picture we just saw. Leadership is the art of mobilizing others. Mobilizing is gathering people together to do some sort of purpose. And it's the art of mobilizing people to want to struggle, right? Do people normally want to struggle? Depends on what you're asking them to do, right? If you're asking them to do something mundane that doesn't have any purpose, that doesn't have any meaning, I want you to pick up these books and move them to the other side of the table back and forth. I don't think people are going to want to struggle. But for example, to develop the next generation of Muslim youth to do something that is aspirational and it's shared, people will want to do it, right? So that's how we're going to focus on what leadership is. The authors, Kouzes and Posner in the Leadership Challenge, came up with something that's called the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. How did they come up with this? How they came up with these 5 practices was that back in the 1980s, they wanted to figure out what makes one leader more effective than another leader. So they asked the question, describe yourself. They had thousands of participants. Describe yourself when you are at your personal best as a leader. So describe the situation, describe the context, and describe what it is that you did. And over time, now there's been over hundreds of thousands of these personal best stories that have been shared. They were able to really simplify this into 5 essential practices. So in every case, when someone was at their personal best as a leader, they, number 1, modeled the way. Number 2, they inspired a shared vision. Number 3, they challenged the process. Something wasn't working right, so they challenged people to do things differently. They enabled others to act, so they didn't do it by themselves. They actually enabled and developed relationships with people to get things done. And number 5, during all of this, of course, is challenging, they always encouraged the heart. So they encouraged people, said thank you. They celebrated victories to bring people together. There's another quote here that I think it's important for us to understand before we dive into one of the practices. Since we don't have a lot of time, we're going to focus on just one aspect of all of this, is that there's a quote here that says, leadership is not for the anointed few. Leadership is not about personality. It's not about personality. It's about behavior, an observable set of skills and abilities that can be learned. I think many of us in conversations we have about leadership in our Muslim communities, I think we all agree that we need more leaders. We need better leaders, myself included. I need to improve myself. But the definition here about leadership that comes from research is it's not that it's simply about your personality. You were born as a leader and you just have it. Some people have inclinations towards leadership, right? Maybe certain personality traits, but it's more about the behavior. So there's an observable set of skills that can be learned. That's encouraging, right? So there's things that you can learn about that leaders do. And the research we'll talk about today says that when you do this, the people become more engaged like this, right? So we're going to talk about some of those skills and abilities that can be learned. Some fundamentals about the leadership challenge is that leadership is everyone's business. It's not just the role of a principal in a school to be a leader. It's the responsibility of everyone in that school. Students themselves are leaders too. Leadership is about relationships. You cannot lead people effectively unless you have relationships with them. The best leaders are the best learners. Alhamdulillah, there are 36 of us in this call, and this session right now, you are exemplifying this, that there's, even if you've had 25 years, 30 years, 36 years of leadership experience, you never stop. You always keep learning. And it takes deliberate practice to become a better leader. It's not simply doing it makes you a better leader, but it's deliberate practice and focusing on specific behaviors and getting better at those will make you more effective. Inshallah, what we're going to talk about now, and we're going to do some activities with, is going to be one of those 5 practices, which is model the way. And this, if you look at the picture here on the side, I think describes quite a bit what it's like to be a leader, is that you see, what do you see, Sister Azra, in this picture?
My goodness, tight space.
Tight space.
Nowhere to get out.
What do you see? What do you see in that picture?
Struggling to survive.
Yeah, there's the fish bowl, the fish in the fish bowl, right? There's really nowhere for this fish to go, right? You are seen, right? Everything that you do is watched, right? So when how many of us are parents? We have kids, right? You're a leader because your kids watch every single thing that you do, right? And that's the first part about leadership, is that you have to model the way that you want people to behave and to act. You simply cannot tell them what they need to do. The authors have really broken down this model the way practice into 2 components that summarize it. Is that number 1, leaders, when they are effective, they clarify their own personal values by finding their voice and affirming shared values. In a normal 1 or 2 day workshop, we take the time to figure out, what are your own personal values? Before I attended a workshop myself, couldn't have answered that question very well, right? It's something it's super important to try to figure out what it is that you really, really care about. How would you describe yourself as a leader? Second part of this that we'll talk about, inshallah, during the rest of our time together is going to be about how leaders set the example by aligning their actions with shared values. So many of you who shared in the beginning, you said, I am at my personal best as a leader when I am collaborative. Then you need to engage in actions that demonstrate that you are collaborative, right? How do you handle a new policy? How do you handle a new initiative at your school? It should reflect that value of collaboration. If you do not align those 2 things, if you say something that I believe in being collaborative, but you don't involve other people, that is where we're going to have many of the conflicts that we see when we have troubles with leadership. But when leaders align those things well, that is where a lot of benefit happens. Now, I want to stop for an activity here. And before we go into our own reflections on leadership, I want you to reflect on an activity that is commonly done in these workshops, which is we are going to try to guess what we think research shows that people are looking for, what qualities or characteristics people are looking for in a leader that they would willingly follow. I'm not talking about someone that they have to follow because the person tells them or they will fire them. I'm talking about, imagine a person who's running a volunteer group and he or she has a large group of volunteers. I'm sure many of us are involved in things like this. What are they looking for in a leader? What we're going to do now, and we're going to try our best, is we're going to try to use the annotate feature on this. So annotation is something that if you go, Sister Ezra, perhaps you can walk them through what it would look like on their screen on how to access the annotate feature, because your screen's going to look a little different than mine.
Okay. I'm actually going to look at myself to see. It usually is on the top.
Yeah, usually it's on the top where you see you're viewing the shared screen, and you can go there and you should be able to click a little drop down arrow.
Yes, it says view options. So when you click on the view option, it says remote control access. But that is actually, I have a feeling that it's disabled because I can't see annotation feature showing up in here.
Okay, so
Sorry
let's
about that.
do it a little bit differently since it looks like the ISNA setup is not allowing people requesting remote control. So we will innovate.
It says to ask William for the remote control.
Sure. So we don't need to
We
do
don't
that.
need that.
So we'll improvise around that. What I want you to do in the chat box is I want you to type in what I want you to pick. We'll make it simple. I want you to pick 4. Pick 4 of these that you think are characteristics of a leader that you would willingly follow. You have ambitious, broad-minded, caring, competent, cooperative, courageous, everything on the screen. I want you to pick 4 of those and type in the chat box which ones come to your mind that are characteristics of a leader that you would willingly follow. And we'll go ahead and look at it that way. Nice. Okay. Let's see. Nadia wrote honest. Halima wrote fair-minded, honest, caring, inspiring. Majida, intelligent, cooperative. Let's see. Zakia, honest, cooperative, supportive, self-controlled, competent is another word I keep hearing. Competent. I hear inspiring pop up a lot. I'm seeing honest coming up a lot. Honest, cooperative, supportive, caring, competent. There's a lot of forward thinking. SubhanAllah. It's a lot of common words here. Ambitious, honest, inspiring, supportive. Honest, intelligent, supportive, self-controlled, fair-minded, loyal, inspiring, supportive, forward-looking. Sister Aisha, inspiring, competent, courageous, forward-looking. MashaAllah. Humble, right? Added in there, which is a good one too. Inspiring. Alhamdulillah. So we got our feedback in here. Thank you guys for doing that. There are a lot of common words. The way we could normally do this if we had it enabled is that each person would put a stamp next to them. And I think that if we were putting stamps, you would see that there were several key words that came up in here. We're going to talk about, I'm going to show you the results, what research says are the most common, the top 4 characteristics of an admired leader. I want to say first that these can vary from group to group, but when you take hundreds of thousands of people as an average, you will see that there are 4 characteristics that come up. And I will show you what those are. The top 4, right? And this has been the case in the United States for the past 35 years. This list has not changed very much. The top 4 are honest, inspiring, competent, and forward-looking. Number 1, honest, right? You won't follow a leader unless you think that they are honest. If you feel that a person is not being straight with you, is deceiving you, doesn't matter how encouraging they are, right? The next part is that they are competent, that they have at least the base competence to do this particular job, right? And you develop that competence over time by developing yourselves. That leader is inspiring, and the leader is forward-looking. SubhanAllah, you see 4 characteristics, right? And this is overall on an average. These characteristics can differ a little bit from specific group to group. I saw supportive come up quite a bit in this group. That might reflect the culture that we have in our Islamic schools of being small Islamic schools and needing to be supportive of one another. But we see that these 4 are in there. Let me ask a question for you. Who can tell me the nickname, right, or the name that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was often referred to, right, even before wahi, right, before revelation and Islam? What is the name, right? There's an Arabic phrase, right? There's 2 parts to it. Let me see in the chat group what we get. Yeah, Sadiq, Sadiq and Amin, Amin and Sadiq, right? The meaning of this is the honest one, right? The truthful one. SubhanAllah, right? This is a huge part of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his personality, right? Before even Islam, was to be known as the one that people would always trust, right? To leave their money with him, their valuables with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you can see that this had a huge part of that when wahi came, right? That the people trusted him. And as we know over time, how Islam spread and became what it is today. Was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam inspiring? I think we can all nod our heads in agreement, right? Was he forward looking? Absolutely, right? So many different changes happened, right, because of Islam. And you can see these reflected in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. We'll talk a little bit about, if we want to talk about leadership, and before we talk about modeling the way and how we model the way as leaders, there is another powerful Islamic connection here, right? We have an ayah from the Quran, right? We have it in Arabic and we have it in English, right? Is there someone who would like to read the ayah in Arabic? Someone who feels comfortable doing that? Whoever it is, you go ahead and unmute.
I can, inshallah, brother.
Thank you, Brother Mu'taz. Go ahead.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا.
Jazakum Allahu khairan. So we see in Surah Al-Ahzab this particular ayah, and the English translation is there has certainly been for you in the messenger of Allah an excellent pattern, an excellent example for anyone whose hope is in Allah and the last day and who remembers Allah often. Subhanallah. This is something that we know as Muslims, right? What are the 4 characteristics of admired leader? The first one is being honest. What do we know about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as-Sadiq al-Amin? What do we see in this Quranic verse, right? That we have an example in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. What does leadership research show? The very first practice that effective leaders have is that they model the way. As we go through this a little bit, we're going to take a second and break down some of these specific behaviors about what research says effective leaders do when they model the way. Sister Ezra, we're going to do a breakout room. We'll do breakout rooms for this. I'm sure now, after a year of living in Zoom land, as we all have, most of us have probably participated in a breakout room, but in case you haven't, a breakout room is going to work like this. We are going to randomly assign participants into groups. We're going to have about 9 or 10 groups. So there's going to be around 4 people in each of those. What we're going to do in those groups is I am going to share with you 3 of the behaviors that the authors, the researchers have come up with that effective leaders do. And when they do it more frequently, the engagement of the people that they are following this particular leader goes up in relationship. There's a scale for these behaviors. This starts from 1, meaning that the leader almost never does it, from 5, which is the leader occasionally, kind of sometimes does it, and 10, a leader almost always engages in these behaviors. Those 3 behaviors, there are 30 total behaviors in the leadership challenge, but we'll talk about 3. The first one is you're talking about yourself, set a personal example of what I expect of others. I want you to stop and think. Do I do this almost never? Do I do it occasionally? Do I do it usually? Do I do it almost always? One of the characteristics someone added was being humble, right? That wasn't on the list, but as Muslims, we know, man tawada lillahi rafa, right? Whoever is humble for the sake of Allah, Allah will raise him, right? Think about this when we're going to have these discussions. Be honest, right? I said a personal example. If you ask me this question, I'm not going to just say 10. Oh yeah, mashallah alayya. Yeah, I do it all the time. Usually I would say, right? I want to do better. I'm thinking about my own kids. If I tell them to be honest, or if I tell them not to do this, and do I do it? Thinking about yourself as a leader in all aspects. That's one behavior I want you to think about. The second one is that I follow through on the promises and commitments that I make. Do I almost never do this? Do I occasionally do it? Do I almost always do it? Be honest, right? How often do you follow through, right, on the promises and commitments? As a parent, right? As a principal, as a board member, as a teacher, whatever it might be. And the last one is I am clear about my philosophy of leadership. Are you clear? Do you communicate what your philosophy is about leadership with other people? Do you align your actions with it? So what I'm going to ask everyone to do now, Sister Azza, do you have the breakout room set up?
I am all set up, ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to stop my share screen here for a second, and I'm going to type in the Zoom chat the instructions for this activity so that you can refer back to it. You're going to go into those groups, and this is the those are the instructions for the activity. And I'd like you to go into those groups. Each person can just take 1 or 2 minutes. So these are the behaviors I feel. For example, if I'm talking to Sister Aisha, I might say, for me, I think my strongest behavior is setting a personal example. It's something I try really hard to do. For me, one thing that I think I need to work on would be being clear about my philosophy of leadership. With everything that goes on in school, with all the fires sometimes you have to put out, I may not always talk about what my philosophy of leadership is, right? So each person is just going to share, take 1 minute or so, and then we'll come back together in about 5 to 7 minutes. We'll close those rooms and come back. If you go into a room and the room is quiet, you just see someone's a picture of a bird or just their name and the person's not talking, you can leave the room, come back to the main room, and we'll try to reassign you to a different group. All right? So Sister Azra, you can go ahead and open up those groups, inshallah, and we will share those thoughts.
So I'm going to set for 5 minutes, and I'm going to open up right now.
Perfect.
Okay. So if you could just click on the accept for the room.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It looks like most of us are back, and we're coming back. So I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts to share. Did your group have anything in common when it comes to your leadership behaviors? Right.
I'll go. I'm Sister Ruya. So with my group, we kind of had in common that we pretty much keep our promises and our commitments. We're pretty good at that. But we all kind of scored around the same with our leadership philosophy, which was kind of on the lower spectrum.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. So what was in common is that following through on promises and commitments, but leadership philosophy was one of them that was lower. And yeah. Just to kind of affirm what you said, that's actually very common in the research, that is one of the lower behaviors, because the leadership philosophy is something that a lot of times people don't take the time to think about. We have a philosophy that drives us, but taking the time to sit down and actually brainstorm it and then practice sharing that with people is very effective. So it's great to hear that you guys, it's something you had in common. Is there anyone else, one other person that would like to share, like Sister Ruya did, what was common in your group? Sister?
Yeah, we had the same. We had the same exactly. We have like some concern about the philosophy, but we all are like seeing ourselves in the commitment, the highest part.
Excellent. So philosophy. Sister Hanima, would you like to share as well?
The same thing, and we attributed it to the lack of time. We're so caught with other things and we don't have time for that. So that was, we felt that was the main reason.
Sister Majida, does that sound familiar to our conversation as well?
Very familiar. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, we talked about that too. It's like, why is it that maybe we do certain things and then maybe others are less frequent? Oftentimes it comes down to time, right? We feel that we're always busy, we're moving around, right? But it's also an opportunity sometimes to reflect on these individual things, that when you do them, it is very, very powerful. Thank you all for sharing that. I wanted to share with you a little, this is an example of the research that is in the Leadership Challenge. And this comes from people doing what's called the Leadership Practices Inventory. You just reflected on 3 behaviors of the Leadership Practices Inventory. There are 30. And of those 3, if we look at one specific behavior, I want to share what the research says. Remember, there are over 3 million people who have done this. And when a person does the Leadership Practices Inventory, I, for example, set up an account, I do a self-assessment, and then I add people as observers. And those observers are asked questions about how frequently I, as a leader, they see me in doing these particular behaviors. And they're also asked a series of questions about how engaged they feel at their workplace. So they feel like, do you feel that management or leadership is trusted? Do you feel like you are supported in your environment? Do you feel motivated to work hard even when times are tough? I think this past year would be a perfect example of that. And they can see that when leaders are engaging in certain behaviors, how often the people feel that they are engaged in their workplace. This particular behavior is that the leader follows through on promises and commitments that he or she makes. We all know this is important, but how do we quantify this, see this as a number? So on the bottom, this is how frequently the leader is doing it. And then we see on the left here, we see that the percentage of direct reports who agree that management is trusted. Do we want people to feel that leadership or management is trusted in our organizations? What did we say in the beginning, right? People are looking for honest, trustworthy. So when a leader almost never or rarely follows through on promises and commitments, 12% of people, 12% of over 3 million people, right, only feel that the leadership is trusted, 12%. When the leader does it a little bit more frequently, seldom or once in a while, 20% of the people say management is trusted. When the leader goes up a little bit more occasionally, 33%, fairly often, or usually 54%. And when it goes to very frequently or almost always, 74% of people feel that management is trusted. When people do what they say that they are going to do, there is a huge correlation, right? So alhamdulillah, I heard in a lot of those groups, we feel that we are doing this. This should be motivation that we as leaders, we need to continue to practice this. when we look a little bit more at how this is defined, is the first law of leadership from Kouzes and Posner. What is it? It's very simple. If you do not believe in the messenger, you won't believe the message. Imagine that we, as Muslim organizations, are teaching our kids, right, to be good Muslims, to be honest, to be trustworthy, right, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we don't actually do things that match with that particular behavior. What happens? They see us saying one thing, they see us doing another, they will not believe in the message. What the message that we have in Islamic schools, organizations, masajid is huge. It's a very inspiring, noble mission and vision that we have. We need to make sure that we're modeling that. We do not want to cause people to not believe in this message, right? Because they don't believe in the messenger who is teaching them these particular things. And when we think about the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we saw the ayah, right? Brother Mu'taz read for us. You can see this is exactly aligns with Islam. If we move on to the next part here, this is an acronym that the authors have come up with. It's super simple. I've already kind of revealed what it stands for. It's that leaders need to, and the first word starts with, the D is do. Is there anyone who can make a guess as to what this stands for? Do
what you said you would do.
Thank you. Who was that just shared? Sorry, I cannot see all the names.
Aisha.
Oh, Sister Aisha, thank you. So do what you say you will do. If you want to be an effective leader, that's a very important part to start at. Okay, so we see that the research says do what you say will do. This took millions of dollars, 35 years of research that says that this is a fundamental of leadership. But what did Islam say before that, right? Brother Mu'taz, is it Brother Mu'taz Kareem? You were the one who read. Would you mind reading the ayah here for us?
Yeah, sure, inshallah. Sure. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون.
Jazakumullahu khairan. So the English translation, O believers, why do you say that which you do not do? It is the most loathsome, right? Loathsome, like hated, something not liked in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you should say what you do not do. And this is why all these concepts with the leadership challenge connected with me in the beginning of attending a workshop, because subhanAllah, I've heard these ayahs, and a lot of times, if you go to YouTube and you type in scientific miracles of the Quran, right? You will hear about how there's certain things that are mentioned in the Quran that have been proven by science. And to me, this is exactly the same thing, right? All of these ayats, right? The examples of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? From the Sunnah and the Quran, all of this research is just pointing to the things that we already know as Muslims. So for us, it's just a matter, it's reaffirming, right? That we could say the leadership challenge, yes, this is good. All it is really saying is go back to the sources that we have, right, as Muslims. So the last part we have about 15 minutes left. And this is a little bit of an introduction to other content that's in the leadership challenge. In the beginning, we talked about that there are 5 practices. We just reflected a little bit on modeling the way. That's the first practice. Without modeling the way, the rest of them don't really come together. What comes next is inspiring a shared vision. So effective leaders inspire a shared vision, right? And they get other people to go along with them on that vision. Like the image of the person pulling in the front, right? They help people come up with that vision of a better place to be, and they carry them forward as a group, right? And people are involved in that. Third one is that leaders, when they're effective, they challenge the process. So they look for different ways of improving. They never say things are just good enough. They look at what other organizations are doing. They reflect on, we just did this particular event. What went well? How could we do it better moving forward? The fourth one is that effective leaders enable others. They don't do it alone. They develop cooperative relationships with the people that they work with. And number 5, as we said earlier, that leaders are always encouraging the heart, because leadership is it's the art, right, of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. Struggle is hard. People will want to do it if it's something that they care about, that they believe in, that they feel part of. And as part of that, people will struggle, and leaders are always trying to fill other leaders' buckets, right? By encouraging the heart, saying thank you. And we know that there is a famous hadith, right? That qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he who does not thank others does not thank Allah, right? And this is such an important aspect in leadership as well. What we're going to do is we're going to take a chance to meet someone else. So we're going to set up another random breakout room. And I'm going to paste these instructions into the text in one moment as Sister Ezra sets those groups. Inspiring a shared vision, challenging the process, enabling others, and encouraging the heart. Which of these 5 practices do you think is your particular strength? Do you think it's modeling? Do you think it's encouraging? Do you think it's challenging? What do you think others would say about your behaviors? When it was a conversation in our group, right, it was shared in our group that I think other people would say that I am such and such and such, right? That's our goal, right? We want what we are thinking and what we are trying to do. We want other people to describe that. And which of those 5 practices, remember, man tawada'a lillahi rafa, whoever is humble for the sake of Allah, Allah will raise them. That which of these practices do you think is an area that you need to grow in? How could you improve in this area? For me, it turned out when I did the LPI and I got feedback, I gave my own feedback and I asked other people for feedback. People said that my strength, the top one, was inspiring a shared vision. They also said, though, that my lowest one was encouraging the heart, right? Maybe some reflection I did for myself was because I'm so busy on thinking about the vision and the mission that sometimes I forget to stop and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for doing this, celebrating the victories. And when I got that feedback, it helped me to become more conscious of that. So what we're going to do, Sister Ezra, if you've got the groups up, I'm going to copy those instructions into the chat box. And we'll go ahead and do those groups. We'll do about 5 minutes, Sister Ezra. So if each person could just share, I think my strongest behavior is such and such. I think that an area that I need to grow in would be this. And then we will come back together. And
if you can put it in the chat, okay.
Yep, I just put in the chat. So you can always open the chat if you want to refer to those instructions. And we'll talk for 5 minutes in those groups and we'll come back and we'll wrap up, inshallah.
Okay, the rooms are open.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to want everyone who's in this to please accept the breakout room. I don't know if, let's see.
Sister Azra,
Yes,
I left the group. Can you send me back to the group?
you know, actually the time is over and we're all are coming back right now.
Oh, okay,
Sorry
okay.
about that.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
All right, looks like everyone or most of us are coming back. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. I know I enjoyed the conversation we had in our group. I'm sure that many of you found some common ground in there, right? It's really common for people.
Can I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the time is very short, that not everyone have enough time to share. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Sister
Thank
Monica.
you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sorry that you didn't have enough time. That's
Yes, we couldn't share, all of us.
Sorry about that.
But
So-
it's very important. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, mashallah. It's nice to share with others. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Well, Sister Monica, did you get a chance to share in your group?
No, I got a chance to hear from my group. That's good. Alhamdulillah. So it's not, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, that's one of the challenges of this is kind of a 2-day workshop. We're squeezing it in an hour. But that's one of the things that we'll talk about. The importance of being open to feedback, right?
Yep.
And that's in creating a culture in which people feel comfortable giving feedback and how you respond. Right?
Jazakallah khair, brother.
Yeah, it's a good point you brought up. Alhamdulillah, it's one of those things that try to add a little bit more extra time, right? That is, Sister Majda was asking me, how do you define challenge the process? This is challenging the process, right? If I did this again, add a couple more minutes, a minute here, cut something so that people can talk. Thank you, Sister. So just to wrap up here, because we are very short on time, and I want to make sure that I respect everyone's time and you have time to go to the next session that you'd like to go to, inshallah. I hope that this was a beneficial introduction to kind of orient ourselves to what leadership is as far as what research shows, 35 plus years, and then how that connects to Islam. I hope it inspired you to want to be more aware about your leadership behaviors and how important they are on the people that you are working with. I think that all of us would agree that having leadership development is essential in our communities, right? Muslim community schools, Islamic schools are young compared to a lot of other religious organizations. If you look at the archdiocese, Catholic schools, Jewish schools, we're pretty young on the scene relative to them. But that there's so much potential here. Inshallah, that 20 years from now, we're going to see a completely different different sort of growth trajectory for the schools that we have, inshallah. And in order to do that, we need to improve our own leadership skills. We also need to develop the leadership abilities of those who we work with. In Islamic schools, we need to not just think about leaders as the people who are the principals or the head of the board, but that all of us are leaders, and that there are specific behaviors that we can all improve in. And the more that we do it, what's been so powerful for me while doing this is getting this sort of feedback from others. It's helped me be not just a better principal, it's also helped me be a better father, a better husband, better community member, because it's sort of changed the way that I think about leadership and be more conscious, self-conscious, and aware of what I am doing and how I can get better. If this is something that interests you, if you'd like to learn more about it, one step you can do is you can check out the book, The Leadership Challenge. You can find it on Amazon. It's the 6th edition is the most current. They're working on a 7th edition right now. You can also contact me by email if you'd have any questions about resources related to what we talked about today. This is something as for the Council of Islamic Schools for ISNA, something that we are looking to provide these sort of workshop and development opportunities for specific schools. So if it's something that you are interested in, this is something that we can talk about moving forward. And one of the tools that is really powerful that I recommend everyone to consider, whether it's the leadership challenge or anything else, is to think about how you can get feedback. Sister Manika provided very valuable feedback to me. You can imagine what kind of feedback you can get when you ask other people to provide you anonymous feedback on how they feel that you are, how often you demonstrate modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, challenging the process, enabling others to act, and encouraging the heart. I know Sister Ezra is someone who has done it. We did an interfaith workshop last year where we had leaders from different groups. And I think Sister Ezra, you could speak about that. Did you find that to be a helpful experience for you as a leader?
I don't know how you did it all the 2 days in just 1 hour, Brother William, but you did a wonderful job right now presenting. But the leadership challenge that I've was fortunate to be participating in was very, very, very helpful, because it just gives us as leaders a vulnerability that we are asking for feedback, not just from feedback that answering the self-reflection for ourselves, but also asking our immediate supervisor and our colleagues to give us feedback as to how we are behaving, how we're behaving and how we are presenting. And again, going through following those personal best as a leader. So I think this is one of I really enjoyed it, because I think that I learned a lot for myself in order for me to be that personal best for me as a leader in my school. Brother Williams, I appreciate the presentation. I love the 4 characteristics that we've talked about: the honesty, the inspiring, the competent, and the forward thinking, that the 4 biggest characteristics that the book is presenting, and especially the fact that how you're integrating Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's reflection and how he models the way, and that we can learn from as well. I guess we wanted to open up for any questions at this point. Please put it into the chat or unmute, and you can definitely ask that question directly as well.
And you can, if you want to think about your questions for later, you're always welcome to reach out to me individually later, or contact anyone in ISNA, and we can always provide a little bit more help or any sort of resources. A common question I get is, can I share the slides for the presentation we did today? It is copyrighted material, so I cannot just share the slide deck as it is, but I can provide the information, PDF versions of some of the activities and content that we did talk about. So that's something that I'm always happy to do. And if you or anyone in your organization is looking to develop yourself as a leader, it's something that you can do it, right? Alhamdulillah, it was amazing we had a very brief time together. If we have more time, I'm sure we can develop these relationships even more. It's inspiring that you guys are taking your time on a Saturday, even despite the fact that we've just spent a whole year on Zoom and most people are Zoom fatigued, but that you all showed up for this time. So Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you very much.
Brother Williams, if you would like to put your email address maybe in the chat, that would be something that somebody wants to contact you, they can do directly. I just wanted to say that, again, on behalf of ISNA and CISNA, thank you so much, Brother Williams, for your presentation. It was truly inspirational, and I hope people learned and took something out from it. We have a 1 hour break right now, and we are going to get started at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for the next session, which is called the Principal Burnout, by the panelists that we have. Quite a few people will be in the panelists just at 3 o'clock. So we'll see you at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Yeah, and any of those other questions that you all have, feel free to send them to me directly. And once again, it was a pleasure, and best of luck to all of you in your leadership journeys. Assalamu alaikum.